So this is going to be my very first interview.
Oh,
So
wow.
I am a little bit nervous, I'm not gonna lie, but this
Well, good, because I am too.
oh, good, good, good. But to me, this has been on my mind for a while now because after my son ended his life a little bit over 2 years ago, I have really dove deep into the spiritual world, into spirituality, and near-death experiences. And to me, this has really helped me on my grieving journey to cope with, feeling like or not feeling like this is an actual loss,
Yes.
because this is what we often feel. It is that physical loss that we grieve the most, I feel. And so
Yes, yes, it is. And it's yeah, yeah,
yeah,
I hear you, yeah.
yeah,
You
absolutely.
know, I've found digging into since Katie died and all the things that have happened after that, it's been quite a thing. It's a balancing. At first, it was this huge thing that I'd got that I had to share, and
Hmm.
I was almost frantic to get it out because it was like being given a million chocolate bars. There's no ways I can keep it, store it, hold it just for myself. So once the first podcast was done with Jeff Morrow, it was like, okay, I've put that down.
Hmm.
And then I kept on exploring, and what was interesting, I got to a point where I realized that I have to stay in this world. I have to have my feet planted firmly here and have that side of life secondary, because otherwise I'm it's like when I came out of the hospital after my near death experience, I was in two worlds, and it was very it was confusing, and it wasn't settling. It wasn't settled. So I've got to a point where I can do this, but it's not my whole life anymore,
Yeah.
because that's why we're here, to have these experiences, not always try and look for some other dimension experience. I don't quite know how to put that. Yeah.
I
Yes.
absolutely understand what you mean because for me right now, this is exactly what I am searching for, though. To
Good.
jump into the other realm and to explore that because when you are in the physical and
Mm,
never had an experience, I feel like it is so much harder for us to
mm.
understand that there is something else out there, you know?
Yes.
And so
Yes.
once you've had an actual experience that you will not question, then I
It's
think,
easier.
right, it's absolutely
Yes.
easier. So to
Yes.
me, I'm like, well, I want all the experiences, bring them on, So,
Yeah,
um,
I've just been fortunate with that.
yeah.
And also what has happened with that, when all that happened with Katie, my life has been, oh, I don't know, you could say it interesting before.
Mhm,
And all those experiences that I've had before Katie, I just put a block on them. It was
mhm.
like, oh, okay, that was weird, but okay, and I moved on. But then when it happened with Katie, it was like, wow, okay, that was real. So sometimes things happen that you don't realize until you've had the experience, and then it's like a light bulb goes off, and you're like, all right, I've got it now.
Mhm,
So
exactly, exactly. So, if you don't mind, would you just kind of take us from the beginning? I believe you've had your own near-death experience as well.
yes,
Maybe share that as well if you don't mind. And I'm going to put this on a different view.
okay.
Oh, the speaker view. There you go.
All right, now, Kate and I are only a year apart, and we've been, I mean, all our lives we've been pretty close. I'd had things happen to me, and then she would have them happen to her. Major arm surgeries, minor things like having our ears pierced within minutes of each other without discussing. So we were very close, and I think that's important and I think you can have these experiences with somebody, even if they're not physically close to you, as in living close by, or even, but Kate and I were particularly, we looked alike, we sounded alike, we were all that. Anyway, so Katie had had been diagnosed with cancer 10 years before, and we decided to do it the natural way. She didn't want to do any chemo radiation, and she was given 3 years, but we got her 10. And it all came down to the last bit, and she came home on hospice. But with her came her two cats and a dog, and I had two cats, so I had a zoo at home then. And everything was fine. The cats had been together for a while, a couple of years before we moved here, so we didn't anticipate any problem at all. And then one day, it was a week after she got here. She got here Friday on hospice, and the following Friday, the cats were like this mess of fur in the passageway, and somehow I got involved in the fight. I got too close or something, and I got a cat scratch or a bite. I don't even know what it was, and I noticed there was blood all over the place, and I thought it was the cats. And anyway, so I finally found out what was going on, and I cleaned it off. And about 5 minutes later, I thought, I'm going to be smart. I'm going to put smart. And I went and found some antibiotics that I had, and I took them. I have taken those antibiotics before, but this was from a new place. This was for a different laboratory, and I didn't know that there was a difference. So, and I'm allergic to penicillin, so it was literally within a minute I was going into anaphylactic shock. I started not being able to hear, not being able to see. I was throwing up, and I had to run to the bathroom, and it was just everything was wild. So um Katie had called her friend and said, come on down and see what's going on. Well, RNL ran in and said, you need to go now. And I'm almost gone by that point. But my nephew took me down to the hospital. They um dragged me in there, and I remember the nurse saying, we're going to have to intubate you because this is bad. And I said, no, I would like to try and see if the medications work first. And she said, okay, we'll try that, but we're going to intubate you if you have to. And I'm like, okay. And then I was gone. I don't remember that. And I don't remember anything after that. And then during the time, well, during that time, I found myself up in my living room, um, looking down on Kate in the hospice bed. But there was nothing around me. It was like a light gray, I kind of say it's like a beach sand, a wet beach sand look. And there was no ceiling, but I was around about that height looking down on her, and she was sleeping. And our friend Aranel was sitting on the couch, and I thought, why is she sitting? Because it's a three-seater, and she always sits at the end, but she was sitting in the middle, and I'm like, okay, that's unusual because she doesn't. I don't know why that thought came to mind. And the question floated from me. It was. I knew the question came from me, but it wasn't a conscious thought. As in, what would happen if I die now? And the answer came back from, I've thought about this often, it came back from the everything. I don't know. It wasn't a singular, it didn't come back from, there was, I heard the answer, but it wasn't just one voice. It was like it was coming from everything and said, don't worry, she'll be fine. Everything will be okay. And then Katie disappeared, and then all the animals that got me there, um, they were also, I could see all of their faces. And the same question came and the same answer, that don't worry, they'll be fine, because Kate was very worried about keeping the animals safe. And then the animals disappeared, and the faces of my three adult children were next. And again, just with this grayness around, just their faces, and that both the animals and my kids were looking at me in the separate thing. And as the question formed, I remember feeling, I'm not ready to leave them, even though they are adults. So the answer never came back, and that experience ended right there. So I'm not sure how long it was, but after a while, I was woken up and told, okay, all your stats are fine and you can go home and all that. But even then, I could see she was a tall woman, blonde hair, and I could see her mouth moving, but I wasn't hearing her with my ears. I'm like, okay, this is weird. And but at that point, I didn't um I won't say I didn't remember the experience, but it was a separate thing. So I'm like, okay, there's something weird going on here. So she said I can go, and I didn't know how I'd got into the hospital. I was pretty much out of it. So I didn't know how to get out. So she said, okay, you can go and all that. And I opened the door and I looked, and there was another male nurse standing there, and I looked at him, and he must have recognized that I was still a bit discombobulated. So he kind of looked at me weird, and then he showed me the exit sign. So I found my way outside. But I remember staying away from anything that I could touch because I was not sure whether I would go through it. That was before even the conscious thought came that when I was outside, I remember seeing cars moving but not hearing them. I remember seeing people talking but not hearing them. There was no sound. And I realized it was as if I had a foot in both worlds, as if I was maybe half dead and half alive. I wasn't settled in either. So there was a brick building with a little concrete walkway. And I walked across to that because I thought I'd walk to the end of the road and then call my nephew to come and get me again. And I thought, all right, I can test to see whether I'm alive or dead. I can touch the wall. And if my hand goes through it, then I'm dead. But at the same time, the thought came, well, okay, if my hand goes through the wall, what am I going to feel about that? How am I going to feel about being dead? And I thought, well, I just got to try it. So I kind of walked up to this wall, and I gently poked at the wall, but kind of very hesitantly. And I thought, okay, my hand didn't go through, and I tried again and again and again as I walked down the sidewalk. And I thought, okay, so I am alive. And I started feeling a little bit more put together at that point. And at the end of this walkway, there was a little grass patch in the road. And there was a sign with metal poles and a big sign saying emergency entrance. And I thought, okay, I'm going to just take a minute, and I'm going to lean up against the sign and just breathe a little bit before I call my nephew. But I didn't I didn't quite trust the situation yet. So there I am, and I'm feeling the poles all the way down to make sure, because I didn't want to lean against a pole and then fall through the pole and have people laugh at me. And I remember thinking that, and then I thought, well, if I'm dead and I fall through the pole, then nobody's going to see me because I'm dead. But anyway, so that was that process. And after about 5 minutes, I called my nephew, and he came to get me. So it was a short, it was a short experience that really didn't give me anything but in retrospect, looking at that point, I didn't analyze it. Now looking back, I can analyze and say that it gave me the comfort that Katie would be okay, that the animals would be okay. Um, but there was there was no bright lights, there was no feeling of overwhelming love, there was none of that. It was just a thing. It was just information.
Wow, absolutely incredible. I am actually surprised that they let you go. I would have kept you in the hospital for a little bit longer.
Well,
Oh my,
and they didn't give me any paperwork. They didn't give me
yeah.
anything. It's just like,
Wow.
oh, okay, you wanted to intubate me. You're not thinking about it afterwards. You wanted to intubate me, and now we're like 5 hours later, and I'm free to just walk out. I didn't get it, So it
That's
was just wild.
for sure. Do you feel in that moment that that it was a near-death experience or an outer body experience? What did it do you think there's a or would you be able to feel a difference? I'm curious.
I don't know, because I didn't do any analysis of it then, because my focus was to get back with Katie. It was only after the shared death experience, and maybe a month or so after that, that I started thinking about it. And I really don't know. The I've had out of body experiences, and that was different in a that it wasn't. It was focused, but it was more loosely focused.
Mhm.
And I wonder, and I've wondered whether them saying they wanted to intubate me, and I mean, all those machines were just going wild. So I don't. And the nurse, when I remember her, when she said I could go, she said, "You came really, really close. So please throw that, whatever you took, throw it away." So I really don't have any records to say that my heart line was flat or anything like that. So I really don't know. I
Well, in
don't
the end, the experience is all that matters, really. So
Yeah, sometimes, but sometimes we want the answers too,
sure, sure. Of
So,
course, of course. But
yeah.
I've heard of several times, because I've listened to so many near-death experiences that people get pulled out of their body before something even happens, before the heart
Yes,
even stops. So, and on the other
that could be.
side, it seems like everything is, it feels like years sometimes, even though you were just gone for a few seconds or minutes. So who knows?
Yes.
So who
So,
knows?
and I don't know how long it took. The one weird thing about that experience was that about a day or two later, when our friend Aronelle came around again, I asked her, I said to her, when I was in the hospital, I said, why did you sit in the middle seat instead of the end seat where you normally sit? And she said, how did you know that?
Mhm.
And so, because I hadn't told her, I just, as I said, my 100% of my focus was on Katie. So, and things were really wild around here, and I had to lock the cats in separate rooms, and so there was a lot going on. So there was a confirmation from her that so it to me, I needed to know it was real, and through that I got the answer that whatever it was, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Many people experience that. They
Yeah,
travel hundreds, if not thousands of miles, away.
yeah.
Their consciousness is all of a sudden in a completely different place than they actually are. So,
I did that. It was totally unexpected. I was living in Tennessee, and I originally come from South Africa. And a friend of mine who was a business partner as well, she lived right across the road from this house that I lived in a small little 3,000 person town. Okay. And she was at that point, she was in Chicago, I was in Tennessee. And one night I just found myself and I kind of laughed because I felt a little bit like Superman, with your hands out and the cape and all of it, like in that position. And I was zooming over the land and then came to the Florida coast, and then it was ocean. And I took a little left-hand turn into Southwest Africa where I had somebody I knew, and I flew over his farm, and then I went down. And I saw that I was at the house that I lived, the last house I lived in before coming here. And Wendy's house was right across the road. And I looked at it and I thought, but when did she have the whitewashed wall with the round top and the pool? Because her husband still lived there. She was in Chicago. And when did they have the pool put in and the fan and the wall, the little whitewashed wall? And then the next thing I was back and I remember feeling like the bed bounced a little bit when I landed again. So I emailed her and I said, hey, when did you have that? And there was silence for a good couple of hours. And then she said, how did you know that? She said, I spent hours looking on Google and everything. It's not on Google Earth. It's not on anything. And her husband had just recently had the pool and the fence and the wall put in.
wow.
So that was another wild one.
It sounds like a spontaneous astral projection or astral travel. Um,
Yeah. And then it's like, what the heck was that? Because I was reading about NDEs at that stage. I've been watching some of those psychics on TV had
mhm.
been coming out, but I didn't know something like that was possible. So, it's
That's absolutely incredible. I've been looking into astral travel, but I cannot get past the actual vibrational phase. So,
you
but
know,
it's very interesting. But a lot of people just are able to do it spontaneously without even trying. So that's incredible.
well, I can do it if I lie flat on my back and I roll my eyes all the way back with my eyes closed. And I
Mm.
can feel I can just go up to the ceiling and then I'm like, okay, that's it. Now poof, back
All
down.
right, I'm gonna try that. Wow. Oh my goodness. Wow. Okay, so let's jump to the shared death experience that you've had, which is I've listened to it several times now, and I am just, I mean, my heart goes out to you, and I was just so mesmerized by listening to it, and I think that many of the listeners or viewers are going to be just taken away into a different realm just by listening to you because I know it's absolutely It's just breathtaking and it's special. And I am so glad that you are sharing this publicly because I think the world needs to know that these things are real. So,
Yes, they do. Before the shared death, after the what I think was that near death experience, there was that shower incident. I don't know if you recall that. And I think the two of them were a lead up or an opening to try and get me to understand that there's more, but I had no idea that I wasn't even addressing. So the shower experience where Katie became part of me, and actually spoke to me. I could hear her voice. It was
Mhm.
and then being able to watch me and her being one at the same time. And again, that was something like the near death experience that I just parked. It was just like, okay, there's other stuff to do, so I didn't pay it attention. So I guess I was given something that I could not ignore, and um, it should have been a bit more of an eye opener in retrospect. And I wish I had spoken to Kate more about it, but she really wasn't in that place. She wasn't there. So with the what happened with the shared death experience was Kate had been on hospice at home with me for maybe a month, 5 weeks or so. And at one time, about 2 weeks prior to this, she had become unresponsive for 2 days. And hospice had come in and said she's imminent and she's going to go. And there was no response from her at all. So I'm going to say this quickly as well, different thing. When I called her son, who was up north somewhere in some state working, and I said, look, your mom's going, because both her kids were away. Your mom's going to be going, it looks like any day. So he hopped on a plane. He said he's coming down. He actually came down the same night. So I came back inside and I said, Katie, and I just spoke to her, I held her head. I said, please, can you just hold on for James? He's on his way. He's got a ticket. He's on his way. He'll be here tonight. Can you hold on for this? She had been, she was absolutely just laying there with nothing. And she opened her eyes and she looked at me. She said, really? Okay, why is the TV off? I want to catch up. Why is everything so quiet? And I'm like, oh my God. I've gone from spending 2 days telling my sister how much she means to me and how this is hurting and gosh, have an easy ride to the like, yeah, okay, I'm here, I'm hungry. And so when hospice came back in, and this happened again. Her son came down, the fabulous time with the grandkids and so on. And then it swung around again, and hospice said that's not unusual, but the time period, because it was about 10 days between the one and the final time, she became unresponsive. And Aranel, our friend, had been here the night before Katie had died, but we'd wondered why she hadn't passed like the previous time, and I was kind of half expecting her to rally maybe and come around because she wasn't going. And so Aranel was here, and then the morning Katie died, it was about 7 o'clock in the morning, and Aranel, who's an ICU nurse, said, "Look, I got to get home." So she kissed Katie goodbye, and what was quite interesting, she kissed Katie on the forehead, and a little tear came out of Kate's eye, and the other tear pooled in her. And I thought, wow, she's unresponsive, but yet she's aware. And Aranel left, I locked the door, and it was still dark outside, and now I know that Katie's gonna go, and I'm alone with her, and I've never been alone with anybody who's passing before. So I was nervous. I was scared. I mean, I wasn't scared as in oh, but I didn't know how to deal with it, and I didn't want to miss a minute. But I wanted to pull myself together. I came and sat on the couch, and immediately I was no, I need to be up next to Kate. So I got back up off the couch, and you know how you get up and you're looking at the carpet, and right there in front of me is this bright alarm clock number of 842. Now, I don't know what that is. I don't know what it means, but I've got too much going on. I can't pay it attention. So I just left that, carried on getting up. It was just a second, and I pulled the little office chair up to the hospice bed, and I dropped her railing. And So the bed was quite high, so I could sit and put my head on the pillow next to her. She was flat on her back, so her head was facing up. And I put my head next to her on the pillow, and it was this lullaby that my dad sung. I remember one particular time when she was stung by a sea critter. She was about 3. We were back in South Africa, and she needed medical attention. We were way up the beach, and he put her on his shoulders and he jogged down the beach singing this lullaby to her. And I remember watching them go past. So, but this lullaby was, and I hadn't thought of it in years, was I could almost see it coming out in like a little river of and into her ear. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting, but I just carried on humming it. But nothing was surprising me right then. Everything just happened because right as that was coming to an end, and I don't know how long I sang that for, I noticed that everything in my house had disappeared. It was back to that light, wet beach sand look that I had in the near death experience. I'm like, okay, that's fine. And then I could see myself only from my shoulders up, and I could only see Kate from her shoulders up. And even the top of the bed was not visible because everything was gone. The animals, because the cats were mad at being locked up, and the dog was a little unsettled. So there was always noise going on, but I couldn't hear that anymore. It was just Kate and me from shoulders to top of head. And again, I wasn't surprised. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And then we arrived on this road. There was no getting there, there was no travel to there. We were just standing on the road. Now, Katie was next to me on my right. And I remember thinking, I don't know what we're wearing, but it was acceptable. But I wasn't aware of my feet or my legs. It was on both of us, which kind of came in later on when we moved down the road. But alongside the road we were standing, it was a slightly convex road, and it wasn't a dirt road, but it wasn't packed like a tar road. It was a dirt road, but with no potholes and no stones. It was just a hit, And on the side of this were these muted pastel color flowers, and they were beautiful. And my thought went, oh, that would make a wonderful photograph because I'm a photographer. And immediately the colors disappeared. They everywhere it was it there were the plants were all the way. There were wherever I could see, but immediately the colors went. And what was weird, and I spent a second thinking about it, was that I knew the color was still there. I couldn't see it. The flowers didn't become see-through, they didn't become white, they didn't become outlines. They were still colorful, but I was not being shown the colors. I'm like, okay, well, that's photograph out the window. And then Katie was standing next to me, and I could feel that she was inwards, that she was, because we'd had the conversation about what happens after death. And her take was that she was okay. If there was something, she hoped she ends up with a good side. If there's nothing, she's not going to know it anyway. But she had this little tell, and I knew she was a little worried, but she wasn't going to discuss that when we had that conversation. And also about um, a week before she died, we were talking, and she got very serious for a minute, and she got tearful. And she looked at me and she said, Annie, I have this really strong feeling that there's going to be 2 of us going. And we'd just come out of a conversation about her dying and her wanting to make sure that I'm okay when she's gone. And so she had this, and I'm like, Katie, I'm going to feel like I want to die, but because I don't know what I'm going to do without her, but I don't feel that. I don't feel like I'm going to go with her. So we'd had that conversation, and now we're on this road, and she's feeling like she wasn't scared, as in watching for something that was going to hurt her, but she was very, very unsure. Kate was she crossed the Atlantic Ocean multiple times. She did a single-handed solo. She'd had multiple, but she was one of the strongest, most amazing people I knew, the go-getter. But she had a soft side, hard shell with this jello, and I could see through the hard side, so or the tough side. And so it's like she was just that inner jello standing there, that I could feel that she was still hurting, that she was concerned. So I said to her, no, Katie, don't worry. You can stand. You don't have any more pain. And she jumped from one foot to the other and she was like, oh, wow. Okay. And I could feel her. I wasn't looking, we didn't look at each other at all until the end, but I could feel what she was feeling and I could feel the pain leave and I could feel her joy coming in and I could feel this. And after that, she was standing more upright. Like, okay, so she knows she can stand. So I told her that we need to walk to the end of the road because there's a gate there and we need to go to the gate. And she didn't question anything, but I wondered how I knew that because I knew I'd never been in that situation. So during this time, I was accepting and being fully with Kate on this road, but also my human part, my now part was sometimes putting a little question. How did I know this? Okay, but I just know it. So it was a dual thing there at times. So we moved down this road, and it was a very slow walk, and we were communicating but not talking. It was just through telepathy. And I was just telling her how important she was, but just on a very low key. And every now and again she'd say, okay, give me a minute, give me a minute. That was her thing the last 6, 8 months of her life. And I knew it was either emotional or physical that she had to take a moment to pull herself together or stop the hurt before she could move on. So there was a lot of that and a lot of, okay, take all the time you need. There's no rush. We're going to get there. And about halfway, and I, I still don't know how I knew it was halfway, but it just feels like halfway. Katie just stopped solid. She just locked down. She stopped. She says, Annie, I'd rather stay here with you. And I just told her that I would rather she did too, or that she could stay with me, but she can't, and she can't go back. She can't go forward, sideways, and she can't stay here. We can't stay in the middle of this road. The only way is forward. And right after that, I got to tell her again, and I remember while I was telling her that this is again, that I'm telling her again how incredible she's been and how incredible she's been to me and how I value her walking with me through my life and the all the gifts, whether they were emotional or physical things she'd given, how important I felt with her and just saying thank you again. And then she just stood there and she said, okay, we can go. So we moved forward and she was more upright after that. She was okay. And then we got closer to the gate. But as from that point to the gate, I started telling her, look, if you look through the bars of the gate was, it had square posts. And then the gate had a middle part that was raised and then slightly down with these pillars that came through or came down. And you could see, or I could see people standing behind there. But they were not like I can see you. They were like a drawing, and I believe it's the minimalist paintings where the brush and then there's a dot and just one stripe would say a hat and whatever. So I could see that, but and I couldn't see the details, but I knew the details. Kind of like the flowers, I knew the color was there, but I couldn't see them. So I started telling Katie, look, mom's there, dad's there. And she didn't like that at all. She was like, she froze up again. And I said, no, 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 no. Don't worry about it. Nobody's going to come and get you. This is on your time. It's when you are ready, you go to them, and that's when they will greet you. This is all in your control. You're not going to get dragged anywhere. And I could feel her shoulders going down. I could feel her like, okay, I'm because she was very much in control of her life, single parent, single most of her life. She was very much, she needed to have the say in how things are going. So she'd relaxed with that. And then we got to about 6 or 8 feet from the gate. And I could now see specifically who was behind the gate. So I started naming them off again. And she turned her head and she looked. And then I told her that in order to open that gate, she needed to just lift up a hand like you do in a classroom and the gate would open. I said, but before you do that, I have to take a step back from you. I'm going to stay right next to you. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to stay with you all the way to the end, but I have to just be one step back. And again, in that moment, I wondered, how did I know that? I didn't know why. I just knew that I knew that, and I knew I had to do that. So she said, okay. And I took a step back. So she was now one step in front of me on my right. And we stood there for a while. She was just, give me a minute again, and take all the time you need. It's okay. And after a little while, she's she communicated to me, can I look at you one last time? And um, I said, yes, of course. So she turned, being in front of me slightly, she turned almost all the way around and she looked at me. And I realized then that the color was back because I could see her blue eyes. I could see her color brown hair, and I could see her skin was healthy again. And she just looked healthy, and but she she didn't look at me for long enough for me. And but I remember knowing that she's healthy again, she's okay. And she quickly turned her gaze back to the gate, and she was looking at everybody, and everybody there was still standing with their hands to their side. It was an extremely peaceful, quiet, just a lovely atmosphere. And again, I could see the people, they were individual, but I couldn't see the details. And then she lifted up her hand and the gate slid open. And it didn't go past the gatepost like gates do here. It went into the gatepost. The gate itself just, I don't know why, disappeared into the gatepost. And I saw my mom and my dad and my nephew, who had died by suicide 2 years before. And he particularly was leaning forward, and he had because Kate and him was so close, and he was leaning forward and he had this whole big grin on his face, like, my auntie Kate's here, my auntie Kate's here. And it was, and my mom and dad and a friend of mine, or friend of Kate's, whose husband had recently passed, he was there. And there were, I knew these people, family, friends, family members, family friends. And then there were people that I knew were Kate's friends, particularly when she was younger. I remember there was a woman who was a teenager, and she'd fallen off a horse and she died that way. And she was there. And then there were a whole lot of people that I knew, but I didn't know where from. It's like when you go to the store and you see somebody, say, I know that woman, or I know that guy, but I just can't place them. That was, and there were a lot of people. There was a crowd of people there. And so I said to Katie, look, just talking, but a whole lot less. And I said, look, there's mom and dad and Matthew, and she just stood there. She's given me a minute, and she just stood there, and I stood looking at her just a step ahead of me. And then she said, can I wave at you one more time? And I said, of course you can. And she always had this crooked little, where I can't even do it, where her wrist somehow went sideways. And she put her hand like that, and that went down, and her right hand came out again, and she reached out to the people behind the gate. And she started her walk was back to the way she always did. She was like excited. Now she was okay. I could feel that she was whole again, and she was excited to go. She was excited to go and greet them. And in that moment, I recognized that, and I also realized that nobody on the other side of the gate was looking at me. Even though I couldn't see their features, I knew that, and Kate was only like right next to me, but I knew that they were looking at her. And there I questioned, is that because I'm glad that, because I'm not going to die as well right now? Or is that, and then it was like, no, because it's all about Kate. And it wasn't that feeling to such a strong extent that the 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 peace and the joy that I got from not having my mom and my dad and my other family members look at me, that was incredible. It was good. It felt good in that moment. I didn't feel deprived. I didn't feel left out. I just felt like this was all about Kate, and this is the right way for it to be. So it was again a mix of a query and emotion, and it landed where it should have, I think. And then Katie kind of jogged off to the other side, and she put her hands out, and that greeting was, oh, that was something else. I know it sounds corny, but it was kind of like a kind of like somebody had organized this whole big get together of people she never thought she would see again. And she was just soaking it in, and everybody was just so pleased. And she never turned around again. And again, well, right when she got to the gate, she was greeting everybody, and she went across between the gateposts. And I knew that she was there. And then I saw that hair. It wasn't a hair, but it was a crack that I thought my question was, why is there a hair on the ground? But it was this wavy line between the gateposts. And that side, the gateposts and everything with everybody on it just drifted away, just slowly, very slowly, gently drifted away. And again, in that moment, I remember thinking, Katie never turned around and looked at me again. She's okay. She doesn't need me there anymore. And not being needed by somebody you love is sometimes a hurtful feeling, but it wasn't that. It was joy. It was like I was so happy that she was free. She was free of anything I could be needed for. And that drifted away into a hazy. And I remember thinking that I feel like it's light blue, but I couldn't see the color again. But I felt that that was the color that was there. And that all drifted away. And as that drifted away, there was again the voice that just said, that was a job well done. There was no emotion in the voice. It also didn't particularly feel like it came from a singular. It was just a voice that I didn't query. I wasn't surprised at it. I wasn't, um, I didn't get a surprise, oh, there's somebody else here, because I never felt alone, but I never felt like I was being watched. It just felt like, okay, there's an acknowledgement, and I just took that in, and then it felt like I was slightly to the side of this road because the road had just kind of blended out into mistiness. There was nothing now. And kind of like if you're driving down the road and there's a pull off on the side, I felt there was one of those, and I was now in this pull off to the left. And I watched this mist. It was, I remember thinking, is that mist? Is it fog? Is it cotton wool? But it was slowly coming towards me, not a particular shape, just a bunch of it. And then it wrapped itself around me. And I remember thinking, oh, I know what a silkworm feels like inside its cocoon now, because I had silkworms as a kid. And it, I was held upright, and I felt I didn't feel that overwhelming love that people talk about. I didn't feel that. I know that I was totally at peace, but I felt like my parts of me were being put back together. It was like there had been a puzzle that you'd separated and there was space between them. It felt to me like I was being put back together, not being made different, not changed, but somehow there was, I don't even know if you want to call it a healing or something, but my scattered parts were being put back together. And I don't know how long that went on for. It was very peaceful. I remember thinking, wow, this feels good. And then there was this pop feeling. It was, I don't know how to say it. It wasn't a sound. I didn't hear it. I felt it. It was like breaking, it was like breaking through a very thin, okay, veil. It was like breaking through a very thin piece of material. And I could almost see anyway, the pop sound. And I was back, and in my lounge, my living room was back again. I could see everything. I could hear the dog snoring on the couch. I could hear the cat yowling. But my head was still next to Katie on the bed. And I noticed it was light outside. And I thought, wow, it's light already. And then I lifted my eyes because I was looked up, and there was a clock on the wall, and it said 8. 8:42, ticked to 8:42. And that was the number I saw on when I got off the couch right before. And that was at 7 o'clock in the morning when I saw that number. So I looked up at the clock and I saw it tick to 8:42, and I looked down at Katie again because I think, okay, is this must be it. I made a connection there even in that moment. And as I looked back down at her, she breathed her last breath into my face. So now I'm remembering at that moment, I'm remembering what has just happened, and I don't understand it, and I don't understand how it could be. So there's that part of life I'm looking at thinking, okay, I just don't know how, what, or how to approach that. And then I'm looking at Katie, who's gone, and it was, I put it in a box. um, and yeah, it took me about 2 days to even talk about it, and 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 try and then I wrote it down, and I wrote down everything that had happened. But it took me about 2 days before my brain could get to trying to figure out what it was.
Wow.
Yeah.
I listen to this over and over, and it's never going to get old. Wow. Um, how, I'm just curious, because when you said that you noticed the flowers, pastel color flowers, and then when you noticed them, the colors kind of went away. I wonder if it is because you were supposed to focus on your sister's
Yes.
journey. Yeah,
And that is what in that moment, as the flower, because being a photographer, I knew that that was where that was coming from. And then and I remember almost having a grin or feeling like I had a grin, thinking, okay, I get it.
yeah,
And that's why I was also not shown, because so many people talk about the beautiful colors and the beings they see and the everything. I didn't get any of that because that would have distracted me.
exactly. Yeah,
And
that was the
that,
initial thing that I thought. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's been I mean, it's interesting. There's a whole lot of thoughts that come in later as well. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So how has that experience changed your whole perspective of the afterlife, or were you always a believer that there is an afterlife?
I had, over the years, as I said, been listening to NDEs, been listening to psychics, been hearing the messages. And prior to that sheer death experience, I really didn't I'd had multiple experiences, but I never paid attention to them. I never took them in and said, okay, well, that happened, so there must be. Um, but but I'd never really looked at it as in relation to me, because with my son, he was diagnosed with leukemia when he was 22. And so that was 5 years before Kate was diagnosed. Then my mom died in between, that being so I had been trying for 15 years to keep people alive, not even really taking in anything about um, my death or how I felt about it. But I had watched some programs about reincarnation. I'd obviously watched all the NDEs and stuff like that. So it it didn't change how I felt. I didn't feel that there was a big change, like I didn't believe before and now I do believe. It was just an acceptance of a fact. It was, I don't know, your carpet's red, and one day somebody says, that's a beautiful red, and you notice, oh yeah, it is. That's kind of how it's been. That in my it's extremely comforting. It's extremely helpful. And I wish everybody could have an experience like that, because then not only would I hear about theirs, but they would feel what I feel.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now, I also hear that it feels more real on the other side or once you're out of your body. Is that something that you can also confirm?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's more real, but it's more whole, and it's minus a lot of this finicky stuff that we clutter our brains and our lives with. So it's a reality there. It's yeah, it yeah, it's a feeling more of I am everything I can be. I can, even walking with Caden, it wasn't about me. But even in that time, I felt more complete than I've ever felt while alive. I felt more knowing that I knew what to do, even though, I don't know how I know it, but I know it. there was just that acceptance of the I am. So yeah, it was, yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, it's hard to imagine, being in this body. I often feel like, well, I mean, I guess this is what it feels like. I can't imagine feeling different. So, yeah, and to have it even feel more real, because to me this is reality, and it's just hard to just fathom that there is something else out there that is even more real and feels like you feel more alive. So,
It is different, and it's also in a it's also why I found after my experiences and all of the stuff after with Katie and the things that I'm more aware of now. I don't know that there's anything new or whether it's just something that was there before and I can do. This is also it's kind of puzzling, and I sometimes want to reach back and feel that again. But then I keep getting this like, no, this is your experience. You have to be this.
right.
Okay, okay, I'm this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that you've also had, I would guess you could say after death connections. So you
Mhm.
get a lot of signs or maybe even premonitions, if that's what you want to call it. Do you want to share a few of those?
Yeah, I used to before life got a bit hectic, um, about 25, 30 years ago, I used to have predictive dreams and I pretty much didn't like them. So I kind of didn't, I tried to not have those. The experiences after Katie died have been um, quite quite incredible, actually, in that I knew that people have these experiences, but I didn't know how utterly solid they are. Um, the one day, it was not long after she died, I was really, really mad at her, and I was having a little hissy fit, and I was stomping up my corridor, and I was yelling at her, and I was like, "How dare you do this? We were supposed to get old together. How?" And my kids don't live all that close, and most of my family has passed away. How could you leave me alone to deal with this? This is not right. It's not fair. And I know you're good, and that sucks because you're good and I'm not. You see, I'm not feeling great at all. And I'm stomping up the corridor, and the cats and dogs are all running away from me. And all of a sudden, I hear Katie behind, just up to the right, and I heard her voice, and she said, "No, remember last time you left first. Now this is your time." And I spun around thinking, how can this be? How can I hear her? I mean, it's her voice. And of course, she wasn't there. But that was also interesting because Kate absolutely did not believe in reincarnation. She would not discuss it. She didn't believe it. She's like, that's too woo woo. I'm not going there at all. So for that to come through was, it really, it really put a whole big dent in any smooth thinking at that point that I might have had, because now she's telling me, no, it's real. You left last time, so that opens up other thought patterns. I had a time where it was 3 o'clock's always been my magic time as a computer technician as well. When I had my own little business and I couldn't solve a problem on a computer, I would literally put it away, shut it, and go to bed. And 3 o'clock in the morning, I would wake up. I slept with a pen next to my bed and paper because I knew it would happen. And I'd write down, it's like, okay, I know how to fix it. And so 3 o'clock was always my magic hour. And this night, it must have been 4, maybe 5 months after Katie died, I woke up already turning around in my bed. I didn't wake up and then turn. I was turning as I woke up because I knew Kate was standing next to the bed. So I turned around, and there she was. She was standing between the wall and the other side of my bed. But I realized that she couldn't have been standing on the ground because she was slightly higher up, but she wasn't all the way up. She was just, I could see her little knee-length khaki shorts she had on, and I could see she had a top on that I didn't recognize, but kind of pattern top. And she had a ball cap on, and she was looking down at me, and she just said, "Hi, Annie," and then she was gone. But seeing her wasn't, she wasn't misty, she wasn't see-through, she was solid as if she was right standing there. And the weird thing about that one was I just turned over and went back to sleep. And I'm like, okay, no, I want to talk to you now. But I just, the next morning, I'm like, hang on a second. I just went back to sleep. How did that happen? Because that's not what I would have done. I've got motor mouth. I would have obviously. And then there was a time that, again, and I don't do early mornings very well because I'm a night owl. I do my sketching late into the night. And I woke up right before 7, but I was again already sitting up in bed. And I'm like, okay, what is with this? Why am I can't I just wake up lying down and then do something? But I woke up already sitting up, and Kate's in my head, and she says, go to the beach and see the dolphins. Like, Katie, we haven't walked on the beach for close to a year because she couldn't walk. And the year before that, we might have seen dolphins once or twice, maybe 3 times, but in the distance, maybe one, that sort of thing. So I'm like, there's no dolphins on the beach. And, no, I'm not going to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning and go. So I lay back down again and she yelled at me, get up, go to the beach, see the dolphins. 20 minutes later, I'm on the beach and I'm walking down from the car park to the beach, and there's 2 dolphins in front of me. I walked for an hour and 20 minutes, and there was not a minute that there wasn't a dolphin in sight. On the way this way and on the way back, different pods. They were jumping, they were just floating, they were keeping pace with me. Some of them swam off on the next. It was it was something else. And then on the way back, there's a beach. I don't want to say restaurant, little eatery place there. It's actually really nice, and they have all the chairs on the sand. But I was standing with my feet in the water, watching a dolphin interacting with a guy on a paddleboard. So I was just standing there and just absolutely in amazement that these dolphins are there. I mean, it's been constant. And then I heard the words, I miss you, girl. I will always love you. And I'm like, where did I'm standing in the water, so there's the water noise. And where does it? But it wasn't Kate's voice. It was just, and I recognized it as music, but I'm on the beach. It's early in the morning. So I turned around, and the restaurant behind me had apparently just opened, and they had opened with the song by Journey, Separate Worlds, or Worlds Apart.
Not sure.
But I didn't. I recognized that I'd heard the song before, maybe, but I wasn't familiar. So I came home quickly and I looked it up. And after about an hour of looking, I found that song. And it's like, how did I hear just those words? I'm standing in the water. Sound doesn't typically come from the land side of the beach that far. But yeah, and she yelled at me in an airplane as well. And she that was coming back. It was the first time I came back from visiting my children up in Tennessee. First time I was flying back to St. Pete without Kate being here. So I was emotional about it. I was like, okay, this is my first time landing without her. And I thought, okay, I'm getting a little bit over the top emotional. I'm going to lean back in my seat, which I never do. Wherever, I don't care where it is in the world I fly, I have got to look even at pitch black. There's thunderstorms, there's lights, there's stuff you can see. I don't want to miss a minute of it, okay? So very unusual for me. I said, I've got to close myself down. I've got to pull myself together. I'm going to lean back in the seat. And that was right when the pilot had said, get, seats upright and everything, 20 minutes to landing. So I sat back in my seat and I closed my eyes, and Kate's in my head again. I'm like, what the heck? She says, sit forward and look out the window. I've got something for you. So in my head, I'm going, what? Are you going to be sitting on the wing with your leg crossed? It's dark. I can't see you. What are you going to send me, an alien or UFO or what? I'm like, this is nonsense. I mean, this really cannot be happening. So I kind of chuckled and I put my head back and closed my eyes. And she said, no, sit forward. I have something for you. So I'm like, okay, this is really weird, but I'm going to go with it. So I leaned forward and I'm looking out the window and it's pitch dark. That flight was delayed because of some faulty thingy on the airplane. It was an antenna for, what do you call that, downwinds that sometimes hit. So we came into St. Pete lower than normal. So I'm looking out the window, still half expecting her to be sitting on the wing or something. I mean, I'm kind of joking because this is stupid. Okay, how can this be happening? There I see the beach that we always walked on, that section of beach, but I could see the waves and I could see the beach and the lights and everything. And it was absolutely, it was like, there were like little gems down there. And it was beautiful. And then Kate was in my head and she said, Annie, I'm giving this to you to explore and enjoy without my issues holding you back. And I lost it. Because we had moved down here 4 years before, um, basically first to get closer to the beach because we grew up in South Africa on the beach. Um, but her issues, and I never thought of it that way, but her medical issues just grew in those last 4 years. So my life had been around her and taking care of her and making sure she's okay. I hadn't expanded and done the things that we'd hoped to do when we moved down. And here she was telling me, not sitting on a wing, but telling me, this is now yours to explore and enjoy. And it was quite something.
Wonderful message that is.
Yeah.
Incredible. Does it sound like you're actually hearing it? And I know we don't really hear with our ears the same way, but I'm trying to figure out what telepathy feels like or sounds like. Does it still kind of sound like voices with tones up and down, or
Oh
does it
yeah, I could tell when she was yelling at me or when she was being gentle with me, that you get.
cadence
But
is
it's more like the it's her voice, but it's like it's bouncing around in bubbles in my head. It's
interesting?
like it's not, it's a voice that you know what they're saying, but it, again, as you know, it's not with your ears, but it's in your head, but in a different format.
Wow.
There's no doubt that it was her voice. It's no doubt at all. But it's just like it's in there. It's kind of, I don't,
I'm
I'll
sure
think
it's
about
really
that.
hard
I'll
to
think about that.
I'm sure it's incredibly hard to explain. Like a lot of experiences, even colors I heard are hard to explain because they don't exist over here. So, yeah.
I had once, many, many, many years ago, and I had forgotten about this. I had some or other kind of dream or I don't even know what it was, but it was so strong that I actually, and back then I could not draw. I couldn't draw at all. Okay. And I remember waking up that morning thinking, okay, I have to find some crayons because I have to draw what I experienced. And it was just being in this round white room with with windows, and I was looking out, and every window I looked out on were these most incredible colors. And I remember getting hold of my kids' crayons and trying to duplicate the the colors. And I couldn't, but I left it at that. And I've actually still got the drawing somewhere. I must find that again. But so yeah, the colors apparently are, and again, see, I didn't even get the brilliant colors, even in the beginning. I got them muted because whoever knew that I was going to get distracted.
My goodness, that's incredible. So I have one more question for you. Because for those that really have trouble believing in the afterlife or um are scared of death, do you have
Mhm.
any advice for them?
I think that's really hard because it's like trying to tell a cat it's a dog. It doesn't, you're not going to get it until you've had the experience. You're not, when my son was diagnosed with leukemia, the one um, really close person said to me the one day soon after, why are you acting as if this is your cancer? Why don't you just let it go? You can't do this. I don't understand why you're so freaked out about all of this. And it took me a couple of days to realize that they could not understand what I was going through because her son did not have cancer. And that set me free in a way of saying, I can't be mad at her because she cannot understand.
Mhm.
And I think that's a lot to do with this. You can hope before you've had an experience. You can hope or you can believe, or both of them, but you don't know. And I think I'm extremely fortunate that I now know it's the most incredible gift. But in reality, I knew before now. There were things that were happening that I just brushed off. So if someone with that question is, pay attention to the things you thought were just weird,
Mhm.
because you might have had that experience.
Yeah.
and look at it in the light of what that it's possible. It's not just something silly that happened or something weird that happened. Um, but it I can't, my experience cannot make you believe. It can bring you, or I can't, my experience cannot make you know. It can help you believe or can help you feel better, but it can't do that. Just sometimes you just got to believe that the wind's going to blow, or it's going to rain again, and it does. It's just it is there. There is more, but there aren't the words or the emotions to make that a reality for somebody who hasn't had an experience.
That's an incredible insight. No, it really is because that is what a lot of people struggle with because they haven't had that experience. So, to actually let go and trust that it is there is
Yeah.
one of the hardest parts that I have experienced. So,
Mhm.
I always say I'm 90% there. There's still a little bit missing. And I always say I don't want to die to experience this. So, if anything, give me an outer body experience and I'll be okay.
Well, and I think okay, sometimes with the out of body experiences I had a um this was all before Katie. With the I had a dream one day of a friend. We'd already moved to the United States, friends that I had back in South Africa, couple, and I had a dream of him one night, and he was standing in this tall coat in the UK, and it's like, okay, and I was walking behind him, and he turned around and he looked at me, and said, "Hey, just tell Pat I'm okay." And he had this tall hat on, and I called Pat and I said to Pat, I don't know what's because I hadn't had contact with him for a while. And I said, Pat, I'm not sure why I'm dreaming about your husband saying to tell you that he's okay. And she said, Annie, he passed away 3 months ago. I had that experience and yet I didn't hold on to it.
Mhm.
I had a near, well, not an, I had another shared, very brief, quite aggravating shared death experience with my ex-husband.
Oh no.
Yeah, I was sitting in the optometrist's office and we'd been separated, divorced for 10, 12 years. So you don't think of them that much at little things every now and again, but not with anger or angst or anything. And yet in this place, he's beating, remember this, remember that, remember this. And eventually I got so frustrated with it that evidently I said out loud, go away, just leave me. Because everybody in the waiting room was looking at me. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, people, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened with that. And then also 2 months later, I found out that he had passed away at that time on that day. But so you have these experiences that you just blow off as being, oh, that's weird.
Mhm. Have you noticed as a child that you had certain gifts, I would say?
Not that I was aware of. My first experience was something that I remember being a little different was when I was about 17 and a half. But my dad was, and my mom, I was middle child. So my dad and my mom, I remember they're saying, Annie, you're the sensible child. You don't give us any problems. You just know how to figure things out. You know how to sort out a problem and all. So maybe there was from that angle, but as far as I knew who to stay away from and who I could get close to. So maybe that was it. But I remember really clearly my first experience was about 17 and a half, 18. And that was where things that I now can acknowledge had been different. I would love, I would love because we're all going to lose somebody. We all, I mean, we're privileged to lose people because then they've been in their life, in our life for long. I don't wish the pain of that, but I do wish that everybody would have some kind of experience where they could feel that I got into trouble the other day when somebody was saying, well, don't you believe this stuff? I said, no, I don't believe it. I don't hope it. I know it.
Mhm.
And they were kind of like, how can you not believe? It's like I don't have to believe because belief is based on something you haven't experienced, you haven't seen physically. You might have seen the repercussions of it, but you haven't seen whatever you're believing in physically. I don't believe, I don't hope. And I wish that was for everybody. I wish everybody had that, you
Yeah,
know?
I agree. Same here. Absolutely. I mean, it's really hard to walk through life, especially when you've had a lot of grief, a lot of family members just leaving you and
Yeah,
not knowing what really comes and just having to let go and trust again is one of the
it's
hardest.
hard.
So,
I think with my mom when she passed away with her last breath, she was also she had her head back on a pillow with her mouth slack because she was on her way going, and she couldn't bring her jaw back up to her face. But her last, as that last breath came out, she said, "Mama." That
oh.
jaw came up, and she was, "Mama," and it was like, how would that jaw work? Because it hadn't been able to.
Mhm.
So, so yeah, and and honestly, I want to touch on something quickly with you, particularly is Matthew, my little nephew being there. He was such a troubled kid. He had autism. His parents was it was not a good situation, and he just one day just decided, okay, he's done, and he left. And it really burnt me up when people say those that die by suicide don't get to be on the other side, or they don't get to be in the good place. They get to go through this rigorous, or they go to hell, or what. That just so I would almost say, seeing my mom and my dad and my aunts and my family and friends and all that sort of thing, Matthew was the one that stood out
Mhm.
as being, wow, here comes Monty Kate, and his happiness and his wholeness and his joy. And I feel and honestly from the start when I was given this, and it's like this huge, I kind of look at it as you get the mail envelopes where they stuff this big canvas sack full of mail and you can't carry it, it's so big and whatever. When I got that with this experience, there were two things: I have to share it, but equally important was to share with moms who'd lost their kids in this way, or dads too, that it's that the kids are fine. And it's so critical to me that people know that. Well, they can't know it, but they can, you know,
That they feel.
Matthew was there, and he's as fine as my dad who died of Lewy body, or my mom with Alzheimer's, and my sister. He's whole, he's fine, he's okay, he's excited, he's there. He's part of it all, and that was such a part of me. And I still, I don't know whether I should try and break into the bereaved parents thingy because I feel like an imposter there. But I don't want to stick my nose in places that I fully cannot understand. I know what it felt like believing my kid was going to die for a while because my son, he's fine. But I know what that felt like, but I've not lost a kid, so I'm not on the same page. And I'm hesitant to get into that because it's not really my place. But I need, I've not I need, I would love to be able to share that part to other parents who are being told, no, your kid's gone to hell, or it's not going to come right. That's anyway.
Well, this is actually one of the reasons that I wanted to have that interview with you because in the group that I found you in, that we were both in, I
Yeah.
I read the short version of your experience, and that was the first thing that stood out to me. So, having lost a son to suicide. So
Yes.
for me, I want other parents to know this as well, and I definitely want to keep this as part of the message, because there's just the stigma around suicide as it is,
Yeah.
and mental health, and so to me, this is one of the most important things to really get out there, that our kids are fine. And I've had several um, sessions with mediums, actually one yesterday, and it was
Oh,
one of the most incredible readings. It was so spot on, and I know that my son is okay.
that is
And that
amazing.
just yeah, and that just brings me so much more peace. Of course, I still miss him. I still miss the
But that
physical.
doesn't
Yeah,
change.
exactly. That's never going to change, but
No.
the peace it brings, knowing that, and I said knowing,
Yeah.
but
But you
hoping.
do, but
Yeah,
but you do because you've had that experience with
exactly,
the psychic that
exactly.
that, that couldn't have come from son. So you've had that experience. So
Several,
yeah,
several, yeah. And
yes.
yesterday was just even more profound. And So
That's
it wasn't even planned. So that was really during the
oh
eclipse,
wow.
like minutes before the eclipse.
There
So
you go.
yeah, it was very, very healing. And so to me, I really hope that the stigma just gets booted out.
Well,
Um,
yeah, it should because it's a cruel stigma. It's really, really
absolutely.
cruel. It's like digging a brick into somebody's head after they've broken, their ribs, sort of thing. It's wrong. It's just utterly wrong.
Yeah.
And what was interesting to me was that part with Matthew, when I came out of the 2-day fog and I wrote it down, the part of that experience with Matthew was equally as important to me to get out than the rest of the story. And it's yes, because my nephew passed by suicide, so that's a hard thing, and how does one deal with it? But there's been other people in my life that have also passed from suicide. And honestly, I have in the last year, so year and a bit since Katie's died, there's been a lot. I was really a hard time. Obviously, grief is kind of slays you down for a while. And I'm on the way up where I feel I really want to live again. And I'm going all out and I'm really having a lot of fun right now. But I still envy those who have died because I know where they are. It's weird. It's you know, I don't, and that sounds wrong in a way, but I know where they are. I know they're having fun and they're not dealing with all this crud here.
Apparently we choose to come here, so
Well, and that's where that thing when Katie said, remember last time you left, and
Mhm.
now it's you left first now. So there comes in the choice of the soul contracts and all that sort of stuff. So
Exactly, exactly.
opens.
Yeah, I believe after listening to countless experiences that, Earth is merely a school for us and for us to
Yes.
experience the physical, which has to come with um, all the negative aspects as well. Otherwise, we won't be able to evolve and learn from those experiences. So,
Yeah, because if I just look at my life and I was talking to a friend the other day, and I've been married 3 times. Okay, I ain't doing it again. Okay, but somebody asked me, aren't I mad at them? And it's like, no, because they've each, even though they ended in terrible circumstances, at least two of them, they've made me who I am today. So no, I have to be thankful for that. These are the experiences we learn to grow to get to where we need to be. So
absolutely,
um,
absolutely. Thank you, Annie. I really, really appreciate you taking the time and sharing
oh,
your story. It
it's
was
it's
incredible.
so important to share it, and it's so important, and if you ever need to get into in depth and more whatever, or just yell at me. I've had this experience. It's the main package is down, but if anybody else can benefit from it, and also if you ever hear of anybody who's had the shared death similar to mine, please let me know because
Absolutely.
I really want somebody else to have. I want to read somebody else's story, and I haven't found anything like it. So
Yeah, absolutely. I hope some people will come forward, maybe, and
I hope so.
share it as well. So,
Well,
um,
thank you so much.
yeah, if anybody wants, are you okay with people reaching out to you?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. I've actually
How can they do that?
I've got just a Gmail account, and it's anniessde@gmail.com. That's ANNIES and then SDE@gmail.com. And I get a lot of emails, and I'll answer every one of them.
Okay, wonderful. Okay,
All
well,
right.
I'm going to put it in the notes as well. Thank
Okay.
you
Thank you.
again. You
I
have a
appreciate your
lovely
time. Thank you,
day.
Jessica.